Who doesn't like sausage? Never mind, I don't want to know the answer to that. I like to think there's good in everyone, and if there's someone out there that doesn't like sausage, I think I'd just rather not know. And one of the best kinds of sausages, in my opinion, is breakfast sausage. I like it pattied, I like it linked, I like it crumbled. I just like it. But you know, if you're on a carnivore diet, trying to find any kind of sausage that doesn't have some sort of sugar in it can be nearly impossible. So the answer to me was, I'll make my own. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go hunting last season because of some minor surgery. But a neighbor of mine, well, he and his son-in-law had a bountiful year, and he was kind enough to give me an entire venison leg. I thought it would be a good opportunity to make some delicious venison breakfast sausage. And in this particular case, we're going to make both links and bulk, because sometimes we like one and sometimes we like the other. And to be honest, sometimes we make both. So step one, once I had all of my tools in place, was to start processing this leg. I deboned it, and then I just started cutting up each of the individual chunks into smaller pieces so that my grinder could handle it when I mix it with the pork fat that's going to make it so tasty. I did reserve that leg bone I removed so that I could put it into my bone stock pile in the freezer. It'll make a nice addition when I go to make bone broth. Once I got everything cubed up and weighed, it came out to 12 pounds of venison. And I was looking to make an 80-20 sausage, so I was going to add 3 pounds of pork fat, which I sourced from a friend who has a pig farm. A little bit of a spoiler alert for the end of this video, these sausages actually came out very good. But there are 2 things I would have changed in hindsight. One is I would have changed the fat content from 80-20 to 70-30. It was tasty, but I think that extra fat, maybe an extra pound, would have really sent it over the top. The second change I'll tell you about when we get to the spices. Now that the venison is all cubed up, it's time to chop up some frozen pork fat. With all the pork fat cubed up, it's time to grind. And my grinder's really loud, so I always use hearing protection. Now, what you're not going to see here in this part of the video is the part where I discovered that my pork cubes were too big, and I had to stop and cut them up again into smaller chunks before it would grind. For this first grind, I ground everything up, both pork and venison, with the largest plate. Once it was all ground, it was time to mix in the seasonings. Now here's a list of the seasonings that I used, but in the description I'm going to put a recipe for a 3-pound batch of venison breakfast sausage, because I know most people won't be making 15 pounds. Next I'm going to get a whisk and just give this spice mixture a real good stir. Notice I'm using a regular size whisk, not a tiny whisk. Seems like my tiny whisk may have been on loan out to some guy named, is it Babbage? Actually, if you've never watched his YouTube videos, do yourself a favor. I'll put a link in the description below. Now I'm going to take all that meat we ground up earlier, and I'm just going to give it a real good stir with my hands to make sure all that fat and meat are incorporated together. Some people have some real nice devices and appliances for mixing this up, but I don't have one and probably wouldn't have a place to store it if I did. So I'm just going to go ahead and use what God gave me. With that all mixed up, it's time to start stirring in those spices. Not all at once, a little at a time. Gonna give it a mix, stir in some more, give it another mix, and I'm gonna add some water as we go. How much water really depends. It depends in part on how sticky and tacky the grind is becoming. You want it to be just sticky enough so that it'll stick to the bottom of your hand without you having to close your hand around it to hold it in. And at this point, I put it in the refrigerator overnight. After letting it sit all night in the refrigerator, we did a little taste test on the bulk sausage, and my wife really liked the texture and the taste. So I decided I would package up several pounds in these Ziploc bags in 1-pound packages. Now let me tell you about the second thing I mentioned before I would have changed in this recipe with regard to the spices. You see, the recipe called for nutmeg, and not being very big nutmeg fans, we actually didn't have any in the house. So I used what is generally accepted as a good substitute, cinnamon. I even cut the cinnamon amount that would have been called for in half so that it wouldn't be overpowering. But after marinating overnight in the refrigerator, that cinnamon flavor really came through. Now, if you're a fan of those maple flavored breakfast sausages, you'd probably really like this. Me, not so much. But I'm just going to count it as a learning lesson for next time. Now that all the bulk sausage is put away, I took all the remaining meat and I put it through the grinder one more time. Then I put all that meat back in my big mixing bowl, added some water, and gave it another real good stir with my hands to give me the consistency I was looking for my sausage links, which are going to be put into sheep's casings for the breakfast size. So now it's time to get them into their casings. Have you ever watched that episode of I Love Lucy where Lucy and Ethel are making the chocolates on the assembly line? That's sort of like me when there's too many moving parts in a project. And I'm doing this by myself at the moment. So the comedy of errors is about to ensue. Everything is going great for the first 3 seconds. And then as I turned, whoa, look out. Well, it happens. And it's not like it's ruined. We just do it again. Hey, worst case scenario, you pick it up and you throw it in a pan and cook it and just eat it. So I slid that casing back up on the tube and headed in for a second try. And at first, it seemed like things were looking up. I mean, the meat was going in the casing, but the more I turned the crank, the harder it got to get the meat to come out. And I couldn't figure out what in the world was going on. But if you'll notice at the far left of the screen, my sausage stuffer is going up and up and up because I did not lock it down. So that meant the pressure that should have been pushing the meat out into the casing was now going to the back and raising up the stuffer itself. Like I said before, it's a lot of moving parts for me, especially when I'm by myself. But these little setbacks don't mean that it's not a lot of fun. I still really enjoy doing this. Plus, you get to know exactly what's going into your victuals before you stick them in the freezer. So when it came to the next casing, things went a lot smoother. Part of that is because I paid better attention to all the moving parts. Because this is a hobby and I'm no expert, if you really want to see how to make sausages, there are a lot of great videos on YouTube. One of my favorites is Scott Ray, spelled R-E-A. I'll put a link in the description below. He does a great job of showing how to make sausages. The real point of my video was to show people who pay attention to what goes into their food that it is available to make your own food, even things like sausages. And it's a lot of fun to learn. For me personally, it brings a lot of satisfaction to learn something new and then to apply it. Not only that, but after just a few hours of doing this, I not only had a freezer full of breakfast sausage for myself, but I had plenty to share with others. I flattened out those Ziploc bags full of bulk sausage and put them in the freezer. And then I let those link sausages sit overnight in the refrigerator one more time so that the skins would tighten up. Then I took them and put them in the freezer on some wax paper to partially freeze them, so that when I got to this next step, vacuum sealing, they wouldn't squish when the air was sucked out. And yes, I believe those are expert culinary terms, squished and air sucked out. If you're interested in making your own sausage so that you can control what goes into it, I recommend that you do some exploring on the internet. You can always modify things and take sugars out or other spices that you don't care for. There's plenty available out there to learn from. I've made beef sausages, pork sausages, wild boar sausages, venison sausages. The possibilities are almost endless. You don't even have to invest in a sausage stuffer or a grinder. You can buy pre-ground meat. Add your own seasonings, stir things up, make patties, and then see if you're inspired to go from there. Another favorite resource of mine is Hunter Angler Gardener Cook at honest-food.net. A guy named Hank Shaw does a superb job in different kinds of sausages. And if you want a hilarious take, check out Ordinary Sausage on YouTube. He has a series called Will It Sausage, and the KFC box sausage is my favorite. I must have watched it 10 times and laughed just as hard each time. I'll put links below. Now is the time when traditionally on a video you would ask somebody to hit the like or subscribe button, but you do you. I just hope you got something that was informative and helpful out of this video, because I sure enjoyed making it. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got some meat to put away and to give away.